Hey everyone. The other day I was reading a article about how loneliness is becoming a big thing amongst people in the United States and around the world as well, especially after COVID. And I started thinking about this because I was talking to a couple of students of mine before we left the other night, and asked them, what they were doing for the evening, and they said, well, not really that much. And I thought it was kind of strange. It's a Friday night, and they're not that old. They're in their 35 or so, and they kind of told me that they were quite lonely, and they feel very lonely at times. So I started thinking about how we grew up as Gen X kids, and many of us were latchkey kids who were just given a key around our neck, uh, told to uh, come home from school and let ourselves in. And maybe you didn't have a key around the neck. Maybe you had a key under a fake rock, or maybe you were locked out sometimes and knew which window to pry open to get into the house. And when we got into the house, we just made a sandwich for ourselves, did homework, watched TV until mom and dad got home. But I don't think at that time it was considered being alone. I think many of the adults and a lot of us thought of it as being responsible and growing up. We came from a generation where we were told to come home when the street lights came on, and we rode our bikes without helmets. We drank water out of a garden hose, and we disappeared for long hours. And we probably watched TV that we shouldn't have, or maybe we listened to conversations that we weren't supposed to, from conversations from the adults. And when we asked questions, the answer was always, don't worry about it, go outside, or stop being so sensitive. But that's how it was for a lot of us growing up in the 80s. And a lot of our parents were working at the time as well. A lot of parents, a lot of friends I knew were had parents that were divorced. A lot of them came home, were tired, and a lot of the parents, they were dealing with emotional wounds that they had growing up as kids. And so a lot of them were not there emotionally when we needed them. So us Gen Xers became a generation where we kind of had to adapt to the environment around us. And we learned to be low maintenance, not ask for much. And if we were hurting in some way, emotionally, even physically, we learned to hide it. Um, nobody, None of the adults asked you how you felt. So I think, when that happens, a lot of us learn to not ask for anything when we become adults. I know I did. Because I was always taught to not be a burden on other people, not to trouble anybody. I remember when I was a kid, very young, I was probably about 9, and my mother had brought us over to her friend's place, and she asked us if we want some popsicles. And of course, being so such little kids, we were excitedly said, yes, yes, we love some popsicles. So we huddled around the freezer, and one by one she handed out the popsicles to us. And I could see my mom was not very happy, and she was always glaring at us, and I couldn't understand why. And when we got home, she went straight to the closet, grabbed a stick, and started beating all of us and screaming at us to, don't ever accept a popsicle again from when you go over to a friend's place, because you don't want to trouble people and do that kind of stuff. And we were so confused. I mean, I just remember, us screaming and crying, and couldn't understand like why we would get beaten for something like that. And I guess I still don't know to this day. The only thing I can figure out was that she didn't want to lose face. I guess whatever that means. There seems to be this thing in Chinese where they don't want to they don't want to lose face to another family or whatever the case may be, honor, whatever the case may be. Anyways, the next time we went to her friend's place, and I'll never forget this. She didn't know that this all happened, so she asked us, "Hey, do you kids want popsicles?" I didn't say anything, but I remember looking at my sister, and she was sitting on her hands on a chair, and she had this look of fear on her face, and she was shaking her head like no. And I looked at my brothers, and they had their head down, they're shaking no. And I'll never forget the fear and the look on our face. Even for myself, I was terrified as well. And I think after something like that happens, you grow quite inward. And certainly, that was probably the start of me feeling quite alone when I was growing up. And, we became people that, we became adults that people could rely on. And, we learned to, you know, be there always for other people. And we also were called selfish if we want to take care of ourselves first. But we were always the one that showed up, to fix things, pay the bills, um, take care of parents when we needed to, raise kids, kept very good jobs, and held marriages longer, probably a lot longer than they should be at times. And we carried a lot of responsibilities without making a big deal out of it. So on the outside, I think a lot of us looked like a normal family, but inside was told a different story. And I think when we're growing up, actually, I don't think I know all of us kids that Gen X kids that have gone through this wanted more of an emotional connection with their parents, but the parents need to work, and for a lot of them, when they got home, they were just not there emotionally, not really involved with our life. And to me, it's like, every adult has to work, and when you have kids, I mean, you made a commitment to take care of them, and to do all these things to help create a supportive environment. So what's wrong with putting an arm around your kid when they're down because they had a incident in high school, maybe they got bullied at high school, and be there for them when put an arm around them when there's and stand on the sidelines to cheer them on at the sporting activity, or help them with their homework. All these things, that us kids, normal kids, go through, right? And be there to share the highs and lows. I know that one of my friends, his, I asked him because his father left him when he was a baby, and I asked him if, do you ever feel deprived? And he says, no, I don't, because I never knew my father. And he said that, but my mom, she worked hard, but she always created a normal environment for me, so much so that I didn't even notice that I didn't really, have a father around, because everything was always provided. Christmas was normal. He always had gifts underneath the tree, and he's just turned out to be a really wonderful guy. And I said to him, you're lucky. You have such a great mother, right? And so there's there's a really, I think, something that was on my mind, and that is why friendships get harder and harder as you get older. And I think a part of it for a lot of Gen X is the being neglected as a child, And from my experience, I think we all want good people in our lives, but when you don't call a friend for a while, and they don't end up calling because why? Because you feel like you don't want to burden them, and vice versa. And then eventually 10 years pass and you don't end up talking, and then the friendship dissipates. And it's not because you guys had a falling out or that, but a lot of times you don't want to be a burden on the other person. And now that we're 50 and older, I think the gap between, at least for myself, between myself and my friends have grown a little bit larger. And because most of us are experiencing new stressors, right? Our body's aging, parents are getting older and more frail and needing help, and friends passing away, relatives passing away, and we're stressing about retirement, whether we're going to have enough. We're stressing about, are we going to get aged out of our jobs? And we're also dealing with coming to grips with, society that we can't relate to anymore. I mean, we're considered a dinosaur in today's world. And I mean, the other day I was walking through the mall and they're playing music from the 80s, and so you start to realize like how much time has passed and how much older we are now. And that creates I guess, a lot of, a lot more stress in your life. And, back in the day, we were taught not to complain and to work through the pain and to keep your emotions private. And so we don't talk about loneliness at that time, and we don't talk about it now. And now that we're 50, I think you start to realize that some days are quite lonely. And some of you might feel like, at least for me, you don't feel like you have someone close to that you can confide in to talk about these things that we're facing now in our 50s, aging and caretaking parents, saving for time, all those things that we all think about nowadays. And I think when we lived the majority of our lives feeling that we don't need anyone, now friends assume that we're okay and everything's fine, so they don't need to call us. And you wonder why people don't call to ask you deeper questions about your life. And I think it's important to try to reach out to that friend and just tell them that, hey, I had a rough week, or things are not going well in my life, and start to reach out for help, right? And sharing your feelings, because before they start to catch up and you're in a crisis. And for years, I was taught that reaching out for help or confiding in people, it was considered a weakness, but it's actually very healthy. And I know this because I recently read somewhere about how people who live the longest usually have great social connections and healthy relationships. So I'm curious, are you a latchkey kid? Did growing up alone make you guys stronger, or did it teach you to stop needing people? I really like to hear from all of you, and no judgment here, just honesty. And if you like this video, please feel free to like, share, or subscribe, and feel free to check out my next video. All right, take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.